So is evil like my math problem? I just don't get the right blood flow into the part of the brain that would regulate my activities. So I
This is
think
going
I,
to take the entire panda to think because this is what I think about this. This is so juicy, and this is great. Yeah.
and
Um,
by the way, folks, Panda listeners, I'm not making this up. This is actually how I think and where my head goes on a regular
no,
basis,
of
which
course you're not
is,
making it up.
I know, of course, but I have many friends who have said to me, "Oh, Carmen, you think too much," as if I could control it.
Yeah, I
I,
take it as a compliment.
I can't. I've been thinking about this. Well, since I did my 30 minutes of Brilliant this morning, I was going, I guess the blood just doesn't go right in my head. It doesn't go to the math parts.
But it could be a thousand things. It could be the blood goes fine, but your math parts are built in a different way that is
Mm.
not typical, and you use them differently. I've seen you try to calculate a tip. Like I can tell you that um, your brain might be
I'm sorry,
atypical.
you've seen me what? Oh,
Try to
calculate a
calculate a
tip.
tip.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and my husband's the same way. I'm like, how is this hard? But that's because for me, um, my brain is in that part of my cognition is fairly typical or adept, and in other parts of my cognition, it's not. Like, like in parts of my cognition that are about how do you experience shame over something you've said? I'm not so adept, right? I just like, but that's a problem. That could be a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so this, so we all have, like, there's you're adept at some things, and being adept at those things can make you worse at other things because the brain really can only do so much. But the mind, I believe, is what really learns. So when you're learning, um, and let me explain what I mean by mind as different
Yeah.
from
Yeah. Yeah.
brain.
Yeah.
So the
Because
brain is like this hardware,
brain is
um,
hardware. Yeah.
and or wetware, really, because it is pretty wet and not hard at all. It's very soft. Um, and the mind, you can think of it as the software, but I don't think it, personally, I don't think it just runs on the brain. I think it kind of runs on your whole body. I think it runs on the area around your body. I think it runs on communities. The mind is expanded. The mind, it does not just what your brain does. So your brain is an important part of it. As you know, if like a friend has a stroke, you could see that the brain is an important part of how the mind functions in a big way, right? So I'm not saying there's no relationship for sure, but the mind can learn, and essentially I think of it as training the brain to remove some of those deficits. And I think that's what you're doing. So like if I
Mm.
I know that sometimes I have a poor ability to filter my words. So that's just true about my brain. It's like one of my legs is longer than the other, right? Like that's just true about my body. But I can learn how to walk differently so that I don't injure myself trying to pretend that my legs are the same length. They're not. And and I think that's what real learning is, especially as an adult. You're using your mind to bootstrap your brain and say, like, okay, like I get you have this deficit, but we're going to do it this way, and then we're going to do it
Mm-hmm.
this way. We're going to do it this way until you get it. And otherwise, I have no explanation for how learning can really work. If you're using your brain to change your brain, there's no way to really explain how that, in my mind, in my mind, how that could improve things. So there's that. But then the other that speaks to the suffering piece,
Mm.
in
Yes.
that there's a distinction literally in the brain and in our minds between suffering and pain. So there's actually a pathway that if you're like a lifelong meditator or something, there's certain people who are adept at, even if they're even if someone takes something sharp and pokes it into their arm, they'll say, wow, that hurts, but they're not suffering.
Mm.
So there's one pathway that will light up, which is the notification. Something's wrong. I don't like that. I would like that thing to be removed from my arm. And then, but there's not the other pathway that lights up that says, ooh, this is really bad. It should not be that way. And the distinction between those two things is, I do think that's what people don't understand, that you could use your mind to actually completely reduce and eliminate suffering. You will still have pain, but suffering actually isn't part of the plan. I think having a mind that can change so you can move forward in a way that's better is part of the plan. And so part of the whole Buddhist thing is the Buddhist philosophy is like reducing suffering. What does that mean? It doesn't mean there won't be any pain. But one great definition of suffering is thinking things shouldn't be the way that they are right now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can just say like, ow, I broke my leg, it really hurts. I want to cry out in pain and I'm like I'm sobbing and it like this is really painful, but you're not spending all the energy saying, and it shouldn't be that way, because it's so useless. It's so useless because it is that way. And that's why I don't think animals suffer. I think they definitely could be in pain. I think there's needless deaths and injury of animals that feels like it's just on a spiritual level not okay. And I don't think they suffer. I think that human beings are blessed with this capacity to say, oh no, things should be different.
Hmm.
And it helps you build a different world, but not in the moment. In the moment when you're in pain, it doesn't help anything to say it should be different. All of your attention should be going to how do I get rid of the thing that is causing me pain?
Right. Well, I mean, what I wrote down when you were talking is unmet expectations, that
Mm,
suffering is when we have an expectation of how things should be and they're not that way.
yep.
And we're like actively
Pissed.
trying to, actively pissed and actively trying to get it turned around.